Welcome back to Meet Your Body. I have already needed to stop and start recording again because I tripped over my words so much. So hopefully that is not an indicator of where we're going today. We are having a conversation all about endometriosis and aging. And so I have a lot to say from both a personal perspective and then also as a physical therapist and a certified perimenopause and menopause expert around this subject that I feel like just doesn't get a lot of attention. And I hadn't thought about it personally until I am experiencing it now myself as a 47-year-old woman. So I'm going to backtrack and tell you my experience and just my story with endometriosis. I'll kind of summarize that. And then we are going to go into a little bit about what endometriosis is. But if you want more details on that, about my history with endo, about what endo is, how to exercise with it, all of those things, I'm going to have links below in the show notes, and you can just search all of my content. Like you can just search Jessica Valant endometriosis and it will come up. I have previous podcasts, I have YouTube videos and workouts, and I have resources on my website for endometriosis. So you can go back, especially if you are like recently diagnosed, or if you're trying to figure out how to manage this with a new diagnosis or even a new surgery, go back and listen to all of that. It can be really helpful. This podcast is to give you information about what endometriosis might look like as you age, because I think it's kind of this general misunderstanding that when we get to a certain age, we don't have to deal with endo anymore. Like it's just gone, right? Like the symptoms are gone. We don't have to manage it. And I think that had been in the back of my head even a little bit, not for any real reason, except that that's the general understanding. When we see doctors, when we read about endometriosis, when we're concerned with it, generally we're diagnosed in our 20s, in our 30s. Not always. I know it's different for all of us, but in general, that is when it's happening. Sometime in that period is when we are starting to experience symptoms. On average, it takes a woman 7 years to be diagnosed correctly with endometriosis. So it is a long journey, I know, to diagnosis. But generally, it's happening in that time frame. Around the times that we have a very active life when it comes to our periods, when it comes to our hormones. We might be trying to get pregnant, and that is the first indicator that something might be wrong. So it's generally happening in that time. And that is what we deal with. And then we're kind of told, oh, once you get to a certain age or once you go through menopause, you don't have to deal with it anymore. I mean, we don't hear stories. There isn't a lot out there about that. And so when I hit a certain age and started to realize my endometriosis symptoms were getting worse, it took a lot of me asking questions, doing the research myself to figure it out. So that's what I want to pass on to you today. So my experience, I was diagnosed with endometriosis 20 years ago when I was in my mid-20s. I had had symptoms for years that were unknown. People, they couldn't figure out what it was. This is probably going to sound familiar to you. Again, you can hear the whole story in some previous podcasts I have. I had been in and out of the ER with what they were calling ovarian cysts that were bursting. I had a colonoscopy to try to rule out digestive issues and problems there. I had more CAT scans and ultrasounds than I can count. They ruled out appendicitis at one point, until finally I had exploratory surgery 20 years ago, and I woke up and was told that I had endometriosis. And so through the years, I have had 2 specific surgeries for my endo. I've had laparoscopic surgeries to excise the endometriosis itself. And then I had a hysterectomy, and that, again, that's a podcast for another day, but I had the hysterectomy actually more for prolapse. So I had a prolapse repair at the same time, and I had a uterine prolapse. So that is a big piece of why I had the hysterectomy. It was after my babies. I was 42, I believe, when I had the hysterectomy. So please know I am not saying hysterectomy is a cure for endometriosis, because it's not. And I went in eyes wide open knowing that it wasn't. So like I said, for me, the hysterectomy was really more about the prolapse piece as opposed to trying to manage my endometriosis. But in that time, I had been told I had a frozen pelvis. I had a lot of scar tissue. And it was mostly for me, like my intestines were up against my abdominal wall. There was scar tissue wrapped around my appendix into my inner thigh, a lot of low back pain. So my symptoms were helped with the surgeries, but also, I mean, for 20 years, I have been trying to figure out and learning how to manage my own endometriosis. And it is a lifelong management. Endometriosis acts like an autoimmune disease, so that in addition to that pain that you can experience from the endo itself and the scar tissue building, there can be systemic symptoms and things that you manage and learn about as you go through life with endometriosis. Energy conservation, joint pain, muscle pain, things like that. So endometriosis itself, that's my story to tell you where I am. Endometriosis itself, to review, is when endometrial-like tissue, so that's the lining of your uterus, so tissue that is similar to that, grows in places other than in your uterus. It can be anywhere in the body. It typically tends to be in the pelvis and the abdominal cavity itself. But on autopsy, they have found this tissue in women's brains. They found this tissue in their joints. So it really can be anywhere. But typically, it's going to be outside the uterus, but in the abdominal cavity and in the pelvis. So then what happens, and I'm going to give you a really high-level summary of what happens with endometriosis. When you have your period, when you cycle, when you menstruate, that endometrium, right, in your uterus, it bleeds, you have a period, the blood is released, and you move on with your cycle. So imagine now, during that time, every month when you have a cycle and that endometrial-like tissue is also bleeding, but it isn't in the uterus. And so that blood has nowhere to go, right? It can't be expelled. So you have this tissue that is bleeding outside of the uterus, maybe around your intestines, around your stomach, commonly, even up to your diaphragm. So it bleeds, but that blood can't be released. It causes a lot of pain, and it forms scar tissue and adhesions, which then cause the problems long term. So you have pain, you have bleeding, then you have a lot of scar tissue that forms, and that happens over time. That is, like I said, a very high level idea and a very simplified idea of what endometriosis is. And so because of that, because it's kind of around your cycle and it is an estrogen dependent disease, so that's what it's classified as, an estrogen dependent disease or issue in your body, systemic issue in your body. So again, it's kind of thought, okay, it's estrogen dependent. So when you go through your transition time later in life and when you're postmenopausal and your estrogen plummets, you won't have any problems. All right, so that's the general kind of idea that we are given. Let me tell you now my experience. And I'm going to tell you why this happens, because I simply didn't know. Like, I am telling you this, like I said, as someone to give information as a women's health expert, but I am also telling you this just from my experience. I wouldn't even think to share it if I hadn't been through it myself. So you can hear my perimenopause journey. I've shared that in previous podcasts as well, but it was really around the age of 45 when I started noticing symptoms that I attributed to perimenopause. Like I said, I had had a hysterectomy at the age of 42, but I kept one ovary and I kept cycling. Like, I could feel that. I knew I was cycling. I was not in menopause. Yes, my hormones changed having only one ovary, but I wasn't postmenopausal. So around the age of 45, I started noticing some symptoms. For me, the initial symptoms were about a 5 pound weight gain that just wasn't going anywhere. It was just kind of new. I thought, oh, that's a little bit different, and it wasn't fluctuating. And then vision changes too. I've worn contacts my entire life, and suddenly my prescription changed. Like suddenly I needed readers, I needed different contacts. So those were actually the first two things I noticed. And then I started having some sleep issues, started noticing some hair changes, like my hair was breaking a little more easily. Those were some things I noticed initially. Then I would say about a year later, maybe 18 months later, I started noticing a pattern of having more intense endometriosis flares. And I had had it managed pretty well for, I would say, about 5 years before that. And really for the past 20 years. I mean, I have dedicated myself to managing this as best I can and still being able to exercise, move, enjoy life, feel my best. Like I have learned what I can eat, what I can't eat, how to exercise. I've really learned all of that trial and error with myself over 20 years. And it has been my mission to feel my best and live my best with this disease. And I had gotten to a point I could do that. That's why, like I said, with the hysterectomy piece, I really was doing it more for prolapse, knowing, you know what, I can manage my endometriosis. I've learned how to do this. And so, about 18 months after I noticed that perimenopause transition starting to happen, the flares were coming closer together. I would say before that, it was a couple times a year that I was having for myself what I would cause a flare. For me, that meant that endo belly, what they call it, coming on like very bloated stomach and digestive pain. So very bloated, and that pain coming on for about 3 days. For me, it's right-sided SI pain. That's where a lot of my scar tissue is. I would have some ovary pain, and that ovary that was left. So that's what I mean by a flare, where just I would feel it coming on and I would say, oh, yeah, there it is. And if you've had it long enough, you know, it would come on, and I attributed it to uh, having an ovary, an egg released, ovulation. Oh my goodness, you guys, there's perimenopause. Ovulation. For me, my symptoms were always worse around ovulation. So that's what I attributed it to. Oh, I'm ovulating this month. There it is. But it was getting a little bit worse, and it was getting more frequent, kind of like it was back in the early days. And I just couldn't quite figure out why, because I wasn't doing anything else different. So I asked the question. I mean, that's really what I did. I threw it out on Google. That's what I do. I don't rely on Dr. Google, but I do throw it out on the internet, and I do my own research. I go to research articles. I go to medical sites. I go to places where I can learn the facts and figure out what is happening. And if there's just any correlation, that's my first goal, is to figure out, is there a correlation here? Lo and behold, yes, there is. And let me tell you why. It is common for endometriosis to feel worse and for your symptoms to increase during perimenopause. Mind blown, I know. Thought we were through the woods, right? Like I thought I was out of that tunnel. I'm like, oh no, it is going to feel worse. It's okay. We can get through it together, but this is why. So when you go through perimenopause, think of it like your second puberty, and that's what it is, right? So when we're in puberty, our hormones ramp up to get us ready for reproductive years. Progesterone, estrogen ramp up. So we're ready for reproductive years. We have a period. We can get pregnant, possibly, depending on our health history, all of those things. Then perimenopause happens, and so basically the opposite starts to happen. We will ramp those hormones down. It's called the second puberty. Progesterone ramps down. And if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, we put all the videos there if you would rather watch a podcast, but I'm using my hands to show you the chart. So progesterone ramps down, and it ramps down in a pretty predictable linear fashion. Like it's not a true straight line, but fairly consistent ramping down until postmenopausal place. Estrogen, on the other hand, doesn't go down in a linear, predictable fashion. It goes down, Okay, right? We are absolutely losing estrogen, but it can go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down as it slowly goes down. So you will actually have times where your estrogen goes up a little bit and then it'll plummet back down. Then it kind of goes up. Like it follows this very unpredictable place to finally get to a down place later on in life. So that's a big part of why perimenopause feels like PMS. Like you have a lot of the same symptoms because that estrogen is just fluctuating up and down. And the thing that happens because progesterone is going down at a very predictable kind of linear place, you can have what's called estrogen dominance. So even though estrogen is going down, it can be a lot higher than progesterone at certain places because it has that up down kind of graph. And so you will have times of estrogen dominance because endometriosis is a disease of estrogen dominance. Our endometriosis symptoms can feel worse during perimenopause. I think that's just an important piece to know. And I believe personally that knowledge is power. I mean, that is a big place of where I come from in life with my own medical history and in how I then give information onto you. The resources that I offer, all the services I offer are around knowledge is power. So to me, I take that and I don't think of it as, oh, well, shoot, that's a bummer. I mean, it is, right? Like, yeah, it is a bummer that my endo is going to feel a little worse during this time, but I don't latch onto that. What I latch onto is, oh, thank goodness there's a reason. Okay, this makes sense to me because now I can work with that. Like, I can work with that. I get it. At least there's a reason for it. How do I then manage it myself? And I fall back personally on everything else that I do to manage my endometriosis because, believe it or not, all of those things that we do to help manage our endometriosis are the same things that we do to help manage our bodies and manage our hormones during perimenopause and the menopausal transition. Things such as sleep, okay? Getting enough sleep. And yes, I have podcast episodes on all of these things. I just released one about sleep tips and how to get better sleep during this time of life. So sleep is a big one. Our diet, what we eat, and we are all different. So I'm not going to tell you the perfect diet to eat. I can tell you personally, okay? This is from a personal standpoint. Going mostly gluten-free very early on in my endo journey was very important for me and how I felt. And there is research around that. There is research around gluten-free diets and endometriosis and how it can help our symptoms. So for me personally, that helped a lot. So I go back to that. Have I changed my diet? I know sugar does not feel good on my endo. I will still eat chocolate every day, okay? But if I notice that I'm building up on a lot of sugar, I know that my endo will feel worse. It's just true. It's a bummer, but it's true. So diet is a big one. Staying hydrated is a big one. Exercise and mobility is necessary for me and my scar tissue and feeling good with my endometriosis. Nervous system, okay? Stress will flare it up, no doubt. So am I nourishing my nervous system? Am I taking care of my stress levels? All of those things are also what I need to be doing in perimenopause and the menopausal transition to nourish my body and help with those hormone changes, help my body through this time, stay strong as I age, right? Stay secure in my body as I age. They're the same things. And so that's what I'm taking from this is, okay, I'm going to double down. Like maybe I did let some of that management go. Maybe my stress levels, and this isn't maybe, like it's a yes. I can tell you right now, it's a yes. I've let those stress levels get heightened again. Like I feel it. I feel that anxiety kicking in a little bit. A lot of it's unexplained, but I can attribute it to perimenopause because we also know as estrogen goes down, we lose some of our robust stress response. So anxiety can go up, absolutely, as estrogen goes down. Not to mention that there's a clear connection between endometriosis and anxiety. Okay, so it's important for you to recognize that yeah, we need, all of us, we who are dealing with either this time in life or endometriosis or both, we need to be taking care of ourselves and our nervous system. It is absolutely vital that we work on our own anxiety and our own nervous system. So double down on all of those things that you do. Maybe you have other tools. Maybe acupuncture has helped you. Maybe therapy has helped you. Whatever it is that helps you manage your endometriosis, commit to it and double down during this time. But hopefully that helps explain what you might be feeling or give you some tools to prepare. If you aren't at that place yet, hopefully it gives you some tools to know what to ask your doctor, what to look for, or just not to be surprised. Like for me, I'm an expectation person. Knowing what to expect is a big part about actually keeping my anxiety levels down. So I think if I had been prepared, it wouldn't have taken me by such surprise. So hopefully this will help you in those ways as well. So let's talk about just a few considerations going forward. So just again, look at, we kind of talked about this, but I've found my endometriosis symptoms can overlap into kind of perimenopausal and even into postmenopausal symptoms. So just look at that and just really make sure that you're tapping in to your body and taking a moment to ask questions. Like, what do I feel? Is there a pattern here? Like I said, it took me probably 6 months to kind of figure out, oh, that's what this is. I mean, I just thought it was my endo coming and going, which it was, but there was a reason for it. I hadn't taken the time to actually look at kind of the reasoning around it. I was just taking it for granted that it was just bad endo again, which it was, but knowing that correlation really helped me. So take a moment. What are you feeling? Don't brush it off. Don't push through it. Okay, don't pretend it's not there. I'm here to validate your experience. A lot of times with endo and with chronic pain, we have either been taught or told by others, or we have an internal narrative of, I need to push through this. It's not valid. It's all in my head. And I'm just sick of dealing with it. Okay. And I can recognize and understand all of those. But remember, this is real. You are feeling real symptoms and you deserve to have them validated and honored, and you deserve to have your questions answered. So remember that. So take a moment, look at your symptoms, see what might be going on. Next, have a practitioner who you can talk to about this. It could be your OBGYN. It could be your PCP, if that's your first point. I highly recommend a functional medicine doctor, and I know that can be harder. It's not always covered by insurance, but that's someone who can really start to do a deep dive into your hormones and what might be going on. Make sure it's someone who has an understanding of endometriosis, so maybe it's a reproductive endocrinologist. That's someone who really specializes in endo. But whoever it is, have someone on your team. Maybe a pelvic floor physical therapist is someone that you have on your team who you really trust, and that's going to be your first point. But have someone that you can start having these conversations with. It's really important. And then usually your team will get bigger. And then we talked about ways to support yourself, nourish your system. Okay, really important. Look at your nervous system. Focus, make it your job to focus on your sleep. How can you get more sleep? What tools do you need to have in place? What do you need to do about either your diet or hydration or regular exercise? Look at all of those pieces. And then the final piece that I want to talk about real quickly here is HRT and endometriosis. All right. So HRT, hormone replacement therapy, which can mean many different things. All right. We are talking different hormones, different modes of delivery. You can have systemic HRT, which might be a cream or a patch. You can also have vaginal estrogen, which is different than systemic HRT. It's not being processed through your entire system or through your liver. That's a vaginal cream for vaginal estrogen. HRT can look like different things. And it is having a moment right now, as it should, because there is a lot of benefit. We know from research. I mean, this is not to be countered. Like, we know it is truth that there is so much benefit to estrogen in our system, and many body systems experience detriment when we start to lose our estrogen. I mean, we lose protection for our brain, we lose muscle mass, we lose lubrication in our body. We can experience vaginal dryness, brain fog, depression, cardiovascular issues. So many things we can lose when we start to lose estrogen. Okay, that is not anything we're in disagreement about. And there is a conversation to be had around HRT and replacing that estrogen. It has to be an individual conversation. And with endometriosis, there are some considerations to have. And again, this is something I didn't know, but doing the research, I now do know that when you have endometriosis and you are given estrogen on its own as HRT, you can possibly have an increase in your symptoms, which I think after today's discussion hopefully makes sense to you. It is an estrogen dominant disease. It's a disease of estrogen dominance. So by increasing, simple increase in estrogen without other things into play, without that individualism into play, without all the questions and doing all the lab tests, without all of that, we just assume every woman needs extra estrogen, those with endometriosis can possibly experience more symptoms. Now, some of the research shows that if you are taking estrogen with a progesterone combination, that might not happen, that symptoms might not increase. So that's why I'm saying there might be a lot of benefit to having that HRT conversation with your practitioner. Make sure they know your history of endometriosis and make sure that they are qualified then to address those concerns. Now, I will tell you my personal experience. I also have a history of breast cancer, so that's important to note. Again, I have talked to my oncologist, and we in the future are going to have a conversation around HRT. She is not afraid to have that conversation with me, and I definitely might fall into a category of being an appropriate candidate for HRT. I am not there yet, but what I have been using is vaginal estrogen. So I had symptoms of dryness, some pain, but more than that, pelvic floor issues, right? I have a history of prolapse. Like I told you, I had the hysterectomy. Looking at the research, vaginal estrogen shows really, really good benefits for our pelvic floor musculature, for the integrity of the pelvic floor. So if you have things such as prolapse, such as leaking urine when you jump or run or cough or sneeze, vaginal estrogen can be a really good thing to try. So, and also research shows that it is generally safe for those with a history of breast cancer. Again, these are questions for your own practitioner, but that's what the research shows. So I was very comfortable, and my practitioner was very comfortable with me trying vaginal estrogen, which I have had great results with. All right, I've had really good results with my pelvic floor, with dryness, itching, all of those kind of things. Let me tell you, though, what happened that I didn't see coming. So typically with vaginal estrogen, at least the type that I have, you put it into an insert and you insert it into your vagina just so it goes up kind of high, and then it gets absorbed into the tissues. I was on it for probably 6 weeks or so, when again, I started having a couple flares, and I would say to my husband, where did this come from? Like, I didn't eat anything weird. Like, this came out of the blue, and we're talking severe endobelly flare. It probably took 3 of those for me to say, okay, what has been different? Oh, I've been inserting estrogen into my vagina. Let me look that up. And I did. And a small percentage of people, not everyone, okay, small percentage, and I tend to be a very reactive person. So if there's a small percentage, a lot of times I'm going to be in that just because my system is reactive. Small percentage of people will have increased endometriosis symptoms with that increased estrogen, even though it's not systemic. And so what I started doing instead of inserting it, I just put it on my hand and rub the cream on the outside of my vagina. I'm sorry if this is too much information, but I'm telling you, you are talking to a women's health. That's what I do. Okay, so you are here for women's health. So hopefully you are open to hearing these words, because we're going to talk about the real words and we're going to talk about the real stuff here. This is real life stuff that hopefully can help other people out there. So I started using the cream externally instead of inserting it. Endo problems gone, completely gone. And I read some things online around that with people having the same experience. So that's how I have gotten around that. And I just throw that out there just in case it helps anyone else, because I didn't know that. I wasn't told that, but it kind of made sense once I figured it out. So for me personally, I use the vaginal estrogen. It has been tremendously helpful. Again, that's my personal experience. It's been tremendously helpful, but I did need to use it outside. I rub the cream on instead of inserting it as deep as they want, because that somehow was affecting my endometriosis, but it's not when I rub it on the outside. Go figure. So I like to throw that out there just to let you know. So that is kind of my experience with endometriosis as a 47-year-old woman in the midst of perimenopause, with my cycle starting to change and get fewer and farther between, and definitely with estrogen and progesterone going down. That's my experience, and I hope it helps some of you out there who have it in your future or are going through it right now. Again, we are all different. Like, that's the important thing I want to say. There's so many of us with endometriosis, and we all have different experiences. And so your experience then going through hormone changes and through perimenopause will be different as well. So takeaways here are: continue to nourish and support your system. Focus on, this is bigger than a self-care. This is bigger than a bubble bath. Okay. This is serious, intentional, purposeful work to support yourself and your endometriosis, as well as just supporting your body and nourishing your body as you go through these transitions in life, especially these hormone transitions. Okay. So make sure you focus on that. I want you to have that as your job. Your job is to nourish yourself and take care of your system. So that's number one. Number two, have a team, whoever that is. That might start with just one person. It might be online. It might be in person. Find some people that are going to give you true data-driven advice and things that are really personal for you. They're willing to look at your individual situation, all aspects of it, and what might be best for you. And then number three, taking the time to really just check in with yourself. What are your needs? What are your goals? What is interfering with your quality of life? Maybe it's endometriosis symptoms, or maybe it's perimenopausal, postmenopausal hot flashes and loss of libido and motivation or brain fog. Maybe that is top of your priority list. So you go to your practitioner and say, this is what's bothering my quality of life. Yes, I have endometriosis, but those symptoms I'm not worried about whatsoever. It is these. Like, please help. What's next? Maybe you're opposite. Like for me, for whatever reason, those endo symptoms just went bonkers and I needed to take care of that. That was affecting my quality of life more than kind of those vision changes and those random perimenopause things. Those will change as I age. So at any stage of life, what is affecting your quality of life the most? We want a long lifespan, but we want a really long health span, right? As well. We want to be healthy and optimize our function for the years that we're alive. And that means looking at your quality of life and really honoring the needs that you have, and then voicing that to people you trust who are going to help you achieve that. And I hope to be there with you in that journey. So as always, thank you for being here today on Meet Your Body. Check out all those other resources I have. Like I said, links are below, but you can also just go to jessicavalant.com. I have an endometriosis page there, or you can just search my YouTube channel or Meet Your Body podcast, the word endometriosis, and a lot of things will come up to help you as well. All right. I will talk to you again soon.